It's Wednesday evening once again, the 1st of September. It's the Tribune Podcast with myself, John McAteer, Eamon McFadden and Declan Kerr. And it's been another beautiful day, beautiful introduction into the autumn, all of this week. And we're going to look at the front page first because we have a very dramatic picture of an on-scene fire, or an on-site fire rather. A huge blaze outside a private dwelling at Drumherif near Rye Bridge on the road to Rathmullen there. And this happened at around about 10:30 last night. We see pictures of firemen, hoses being used on a flat roof and all this kind of thing. This is a beautiful dwelling. 2 units of the Donegal Fire Service attended this scene, and locals whom we spoke to talked about the spread and how quickly the whole roof space was engulfed, and firemen are seen there trying to get inside the front door. And it was ablaze within minutes, probably long before the fire service arrived, and there was going to be no saving it. Gardaí were also at the scene. Now, this is a well-known property. It has made the headlines for different reasons, but we're not really focusing on that. But it's been put on the market there in the last couple of months with a guide price of €195,000. And I know people that were just dying to buy it as an investment or a holiday home or whatever. It doesn't look that that's going to happen there now. It's one of those dramatic actual scenes of the firemen fighting the blaze and the flames and the sparks rising high into the air.
Yeah.
Recently refurbished, it would be a very valuable site apart from the value of the house itself.
It's a splendid setting there, isn't it?
It's just right there on the estuary at Rye Bridge. Very, very picturesque spot.
Kind of a newly refurbished house too, I think, was it?
Absolutely, yeah. This would have been a much smaller house back in the day, maybe 30, 40 years ago. And the owner of that would have been a lady, I seem to remember. And in later times then it was the subject to national news headlines for other reasons, which I'm not going to deal with here. But like at the same time, the house was unoccupied, nobody was injured, but forensics were at the scene earlier on today. Their work was continuing, and the fire services had to return again this morning, sometime after 7:30 when the flames reignited once more. But the house is just it's just to put it mildly, it's just been gutted. So the Garda press office were very, very brief in saying that the scene was preserved for a technical examination. Any more comments on that?
It'll be interesting to see what the interest of that investigation will be. As you said, the house has been subject to a lot of attention in recent years, but they'll have to let these take their due course. But there's no two ways. It's a very dramatic picture now.
It's a magnificent picture.
All the firefighters in full regalia tackling the blaze and hammering out. I think it took them a couple of hours to get that under control as well.
It did, yeah.
So
I think there's about 10 firemen there at the scene.
Well, it had to be revisited, had it in the
had to be revisited this morning, yeah.
Again, was it?
Yeah. But after that then we're going to go to the big news bulletin of this week so far. And that is the easing of COVID restrictions announced last evening by the Taoiseach Michael Martin. Did it make the big headlines that you expected, Declan?
Not really. I think it was a lot of the restrictions or the easing of the restrictions were well flagged in advance, which is
Radker had published them well in advance,
which is normal enough nowadays. So I don't think there was any great shock on it. But as you say yourself in the headline there, John, don't ban the masks just yet. I mean,
but
there's still a good way to go.
That there is a double-edged sword, because I never saw more people that have banned their masks. No matter where you go, you're not seeing people wearing masks. You're not seeing people socially distancing. Just listening to national radio yesterday, a holidaymaker in the west of Ireland, sometime last week, went into a large licensed premises and restaurant to find people dancing on tables and all this type of thing. I haven't heard any local reports of that. Have you, Eamon, around Creaslet on Finney?
I don't think it's been too bad, but I'll tell you, it's busy. It's busy. There's still a lot of people around, and there's a lot of people in these establishments, and it seems to be the masks are less and less of an item that you see, down to maybe 50% or even less in places now,
after all these months, since the year last March, people have had enough, haven't they?
Well, That's it too. And I suppose, like, as you were chatting about this last night, John, too, about the way that these new measures are coming out, with all these kind of caveats now. So, like, they're allowed to be, like, buses are back to full capacity, but the masks have to be in place. So there's kind of an opening of certain things, but then the masks are kind of maybe not required in a certain area, and they are in others.
I'm trying to leave it with the individual personal responsibility and all that, but I suppose bearing in mind that there's still a very high incidence rate of.
But should they not have done that earlier in the summer, Declan?
So what's that?
Personal responsibility could have been introduced, especially in the music scene.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the music scene has been the slowest to reopen, and again they're subject to all those restrictions. That will make you wonder, will people look at that and say, look, we'll not bother going out again until we see how it goes. Let us sit till Halloween.
There's certainly evidence of that people are going to still remain very, very cautious. Just, a lot of people now. You have obviously the other side of it where people have, as we were talking about, have been the masks and are just
that's very evident this last couple of weeks.
Back to normal as it were.
The Zappone affair, or as the Phoenix calls it, the Zapper affair, seems to have sent caution right out the window.
Yeah.
And I mean, people have had a belly full of those kind of things. It must be now more than a year since Golfgate, and that we talked about that here. That was the first time that it became evident that there was a big kickback against officialdom. People were following the regulations pretty strictly until that, and a lot of people took it into their own hands to do as they thought was right. When they saw the
Marion Gate certainly didn't help with that in public confidence in that.
And it's a bit ironic at the same time, while the restrictions are now being eased and obviously by October the 22nd completely gone, pretty much, that we still have a high incidence rate of COVID numbers and that sort of stuff, in the county.
Just listening to the news earlier on there in the afternoon, they're expecting numbers to peak at around 2,500 in the next fortnight, and hundreds more in hospital. It isn't very bright news at all. At the same time, the country can't remain in lockdown forever. It seems like that now. Sadly, there are people who are so entrenched in their own fear inside their own homes, they're afraid to come out. There's certain people who ring now and again, and the first and last words that you hear from them, good God, it's going to kill us all before it's over. They're just tuned to every news bulletin on radio and TV all day and all night.
They're nearly institutionalised in their own houses.
Unfortunately, and that issue hasn't been addressed at all by the government, because NEFIT has spread this aura of fear amongst the people. That worked at the beginning. Now it has had a sort of a bounce back of an opposite impact entirely. And until they get people encouraged to get out walking even. You remember this time last year, everywhere you went, people were walking. Now, when you go out, you rarely meet people walking again. That is all gone. But anyway, the restrictions, does it make any difference to your life, Eamon?
Not particularly, because I don't be out and about that much anyway. Obviously.
What about you, Declan?
What's the same really? It's, apart from, I suppose the only change from my perspective will be, there's a bit more sport and that sort of stuff. You're out a bit more from that point of view, but other than that, my general wouldn't have changed much now.
Where do you see it by Christmas time? Do you see it all over?
Oh, that's very difficult to say. There'll be twists and turns yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the figures go over the winter months, because like as the tourism season winds down, there should be less mingling, less interaction, as you said. Like Halloween kind of is coming up.
Yeah, but you're heading into a damper season.
Yeah.
For chest colds and all this kind of thing. But let's not dwell on those things. Let's hope that we have seen the worst of COVID, and that gradually it will disappear with time and with the increased level of vaccinations.
Yes.
Now we'll go into the property market. You seem to be selling everything in Dunfanny these days, except the kitchen sink.
It was an interesting one. A kitchen sink for some of these places, I would say, might set you back a little bit. These historic properties. I actually had kept an eye on this property called Ochiltree that was in Marblehill, but went on the market there at the start of the summer. We had this in the Tirconaill Tribune back then, with a guide price of just shy of €1 million. A nice period house from the 1920s with 15 acres of land. So it was, when I was looking around for that I noticed that that the the sale agents, Savills, had a sale agreed sign, have a sale agreed
Aye.
marker on their website, and the sign has come down at the property, so it would indicate that that's at an advanced stage now, and there's a sale agreed for it. But it was, while I was looking at it, then I went on to the property price register, and the property services regulator, from the property services regulatory, like I can't even say the word, regulatory authority. But another property nearby of even more historical significance, Marble Hill House, they had it listed that it was sold back just in July there, on July 30th, and that is recorded as a sale of just over $500,000, which in some ways is quite quite surprising though, because I don't have any recollection of that house being placed on the market. A lot of people would have had a keen interest in that property over the years, given its prime location overlooking the beach and all that. It is linked to various figures in the past, and also linked to current celebrities and the some very wealthy figures in the present climate. But I never knew it to be on the market. I never heard much more. So that's quite surprising to see this go on the market. It's even flagged that it is.
But properties of all kinds at the minute. I mean, we're back now to pre-2008. Pre-property crash prices. Just looking at some of the property supplements and the national papers of the weekend, you'll see fairly ordinary houses. Maybe it's the location out in West Cork, but not near the coast. A basic 2-story house for $845,000. Huge money. But listen, we're moving on with time, because we have to pay a tribute to Councillor Baron McGuinness, whose remains were laid to rest in his native Culdaff today following Requiem Mass, where the Bishop Donald McKeown presided and delivered the homily. I knew Baron McGuinness before he was ever on the council, and I knew him through football, and was one of his big passions in life was football, as was gardening, as was beekeeping. Apart from that, him and Jan recently celebrated their golden jubilee, the 5 of a family. A fine councillor, a hard-working councillor, and he took no prisoners, Declan.
He was at the heart of Fine Gael since, I suppose, he was at first election in 79, and John, I suppose over the years you seen him in action at the council meetings, and I did over the last decade or more, and he was a formidable performer.
He was a very fluent contributor. He didn't contribute to a council debate for the sake of being heard, but he had his homework always well done. Councillors of that generation. He was elected in 79. I was just looking at the records last night there, and he was
one of the senior statesmen of the
county. He was of that era on the same day in his shown 7th of June 1979. They're all dead and gone now. Himself, Hugh Conahan, Bertie Boggs, Eddie Fortin, Paddy Keaveney, and the legendary Sean Egg McLaughlin. They all gave great service, not only to Inishowen but to the council, and in many cases to the country as well. Baron McGuinness would have served on every known body in local authority and on the HSE and the North Western Health Board, the General Council of County Councils, the VEC, and how he found time to run his business and be a family man.
It's not even just the one business either.
He had several businesses, He had a lounge bar, he had a pub there, and it was just a very shop. It was it was Culdaff. It was the heartbeat of the Culdaff community, and indeed in his show. But his longevity in that role, he contested 8 local elections, and from the very first one, his seat was never in doubt. He had 3 general election runs out. He ran in 1982 or 92. He ran in 92 was the last. 2002 was his last run out. He also ran in 81 and in 92. Always got up around that figure of 4,000 or thereabouts, but being based at the lower end of the constituency in the Inishowen Peninsula was always going to be a drawback. But he made a very significant contribution. And the bishop there speaking about him today just simply said that his life was a life of service. Our lives are not our own; they are meant to be lived in the service of others, and that symbolises Bernard, and our deepest sympathy goes to the entire community in Inishowen, the McGuinness family, and indeed the wider Fine Gael family. May he rest in peace. We'll return now. Declan, you probably have a handle on this as well, you as well, Eamon, in that we are revisiting the Donegal youth. Their plans for a new football pitch have been delayed once again. They have already made planning application on 2 occasions. Now they've been asked by the council to put in an Article 35 because a Natura impact study in NIS was submitted last July, and as far as the council's planning department is concerned, they're saying that there was significant new evidence produced within that it now necessitates a further planning application and all the site notices and newspaper notices. That is going to delay it for at least another 6 months, if not longer. The club has been without a home for several years. The area is losing out. You just take it up from there because you're living in that community.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that up until recently it was listed on the council website that decision, as it wasn't further information or anything else, a decision was due on September 5th. So it was actually there, as far as my understanding is, the club were awaiting an outcome one way or another, and I think that's what they had focused on. Now they're in limbo again, and it's coming at a great, I suppose, a great cost to the youth of the area who are involved in the club. Also a great cost in the financials that I know what they have to try and.
It's a huge setback for the club, and I mean they are a vibrant club, and there's some great people involved there, and this has been going on now for just over around 3 years since they had to vacate the pitch, their previous pitch, and they've been playing down in Falcara and up in Creasla, and
I think
that's been the goodwill.
After nurturing all those young players, they're now moving on to a senior level at that particular age group, where they had ambitions and plans to apply to the Donegal League, probably to the lower echelons of that for a start. That has all to be put on hold, and those players are now moving out to join teams like Fanad United and all this.
They're losing huge ground. There's no pun intended, but that's the core of that club now is going to have to effectively nearly start over anew every time, and it does threaten the viability of the club. There's no two ways about it. I know it's the goodwill.
Do you know how many times can they actually go back to the well here? And what is the real problem here? Let's get to the heart of this problem. Why should anybody be objecting to this development? I mean, it is a football pitch and dressing rooms, and basically that's about it.
That's about it. And you'd think that there's a precedent set, and that it's almost next door to the St Michael's GA pitches, which is is a fine football ground club. And it's kind of a real heart of the community thing. Many people involved.
It's in the townland of Luggerbrack, way up there.
But it's only next door.
A lovely location.
There is a precedent.
Yeah, there is.
And it's not even in one of it's from the plans you can see it looks like it's going to be almost shielded behind a forest wall. So there is a lot of frustration, as you can imagine.
We can only hope that with this new planning notice, that a resolution can be found here to whatever the issues that's being raised are, and we will revisit this again, no doubt, because we have now run out of time, and we'll talk to you again next week. Meanwhile, check out our podcast and check out tirconaill tribune.com. Talk to you next week.